Welcome to the Yard of Greatness podcast. My name is June Allen, your sister in service from juneallen.net. On this show, I empower non-white listeners to prioritize their racial wellness and emotional sobriety. The platform is for educational purposes, is based on my experiences, and is shared in good faith. Always consult your doctor, therapist, or licensed mental health professional before applying any of the suggestions given within this platform. The vision is to build a blackalicious life of empowerment so there can be peace. Now on with the show. Hi, greetings family, it's June. I hope you're doing well. Thanks for joining. And today we're going to be talking about how can we surrender and just let the good stuff happen? Do you find it difficult to receive? How can we live in our greatness when so many of us are so used to kind of living with pain, living with misery, living with dysfunction? If you grew up in an environment where there was a lot of pain, where there was a lot of chaos, and you didn't experience a lot of fun as a child, it's going to be very difficult as an adult to actually receive and accept all the positive feelings of joy, feelings of hope. It's going to be hard because you're always going to be thinking everything's going to go wrong. When our emotions are always wired within negative feelings or pain, then it kind of makes sense that we're going to attract more of that because that's what we're used to, and that's the energy that we feel within is going to be what we're going to attract externally. So when if we haven't dealt with the pain, if we're used to pain, if that's what we were raised around, then it kind of makes sense that we're going to experience the same thing as adults because that's all we know. It's all we know. You can't expect to be raised in an environment that was difficult and painful and chaotic, violent, or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden, just because somebody says, oh, you need to feel joy or you need to, be great, that all of a sudden it's going to happen. It's actually going to be a process we need to go through. You're going to need to go through a process that's going to help you rewire what you've learned. You're going to live what you learned. And you have to go through a process of dismantling that so that you can realign living in your greatness. And sometimes, although you may not want to admit it, that dysfunction and the pain that you carry from whatever situation, be it childhood or current or previous relationship or for whatever reason, that stuff can feel familiar. It can be like your friend. It can be the thing that keeps you safe in a way, because stepping out of that and taking the risk to experience love, to experience joy, to experience happiness, that can be a painful transition in of itself, because that involves taking risks. It involves taking emotional risks that might feel difficult for you. Living in the pain is not a nice experience, but at least you know what to expect. Are you willing to be honest with yourself and admit that there is a part of you that actually, there's a payoff to staying in the pain? The payoff is that you don't get to take responsibility for yourself. The payoff is that you've always got an excuse. The payoff is that you can always blame somebody else. When are you going to take responsibility for your life? When are you going to start taking responsibility for your future? When is going to be the right time for you to start thinking about your legacy? It's important to acknowledge when difficult and painful things happen to us, but those things should not keep us enslaved in our future. Those things, when we hang on to those things in the past, they end up enslaving our future. And we can't blame anybody else for that. You have to take responsibility for that. Because as an adult, as grown-ups, we now have a responsibility to figure that stuff out and not pass on the dysfunction that was passed on to us. Sometimes what happens when you're raised in an environment that was painful is that sometimes we can get stuck. You can get stuck in the memory. The memory can be so painful that you just get stuck there, you get frozen there, so you never really get the opportunity to grow up. And I think a lot of black people fall into this category because of our history and because of what we experience currently under the system of white supremacy. Pain can keep us stuck in our childlike thinking, in our childlike behaviours, in our childlike attitude to taking responsibility for ourselves. We're so frozen by the pain, we're so frozen by the fear of stepping out and standing up, that we remain in this kind of childlike place, and we're not able to stand in who we are because our childlike selves are still frozen in this, abusive white parent, victim-child relationship, which is real for black people. This is why black people sometimes find it really hard to step out of this role. And this is another way that white supremacy keeps us enslaved, because we're emotionally immature on so many levels, and this is going to bleed into how we react to each other and how we relate to and how we raise our families. It's going to impact all of those things. A lot of times we're afraid to let the good stuff happen because we think that we're going to lose it. The pain is familiar, at least we know what we're going to get, and so we're afraid to make the changes. We're afraid to step out into something that's actually going to benefit us, because change involves risk. Change involves going through a process of withdrawal from the old behaviours and actually taking the risk to accept something that's good for us. So the irony is that the good stuff then also becomes a threat for us. It also becomes a fearful place for us because we're afraid of loss. We're afraid of losing that good thing. So we stay in the pain because it's easier. We stay in the isolation because it's easier. And this is also a very childlike way that we keep ourselves small. This is how we keep ourselves small. This is how we hide in the world. This is how we abandon ourselves. The sad thing is that if you don't give yourself permission to work through the old stuff, the dysfunction, the old behaviours, the pain, if you don't give yourself permission to work through that stuff, then you're just going to attract more of it. And that's the truth. The law of the universe is kind of like you attract who you are. And if you've got all this stuff, if you've got all this unresolved stuff that's going on beneath the surface, it's going to leak out. It's going to leak out in different ways. Either you'll end up being unkind to yourself, or you can end up being unkind to those around you, those you love. That's the way that this stuff works. And so it is important for us to give ourselves permission to take that risk and allow ourselves to receive the love that we deserve. You deserve the good stuff. You deserve love. You deserve abundance. But you have to take the risk to make that transition from being in the misery, from being in the pain, to standing in your greatness. The journey may not be what you want. You might have expectations about how you expect the journey to go, and maybe that's another thing that's keeping you from starting this journey, from making that transition, because you're afraid of what you don't know. And I know that was something that I experienced. It's hard to step out into territory that you don't know. As part of my entrepreneurial journey, this is something that I've really struggled with at times, because I would be put in positions where I know that my higher power is trying to bless me and to shower me with abundance, shower me with love. And I just found it so hard to accept it. I found it really hard to kind of sit in the joy of what my greatness feels like. And for me, it's a daily thing that I have to really embrace and look at and challenge and deal with. It's like I have to build a relationship with that misery, you know, the chaos and all of the old behaviours, the old familiarity that I had with all of those feelings. And now I have to say, you know, I have to be really conscious and say to myself that I don't have to live that way anymore, and that I deserve change, I deserve abundance, I deserve to live in a space that isn't painful. But it was hard making that transition, because I was afraid that if I allowed myself to feel abundant, if I allowed myself to feel good, if I allowed myself to feel confident, that somehow all of that stuff was just going to get taken away from me. It was just going to get ripped out of my hand, ripped out of my soul, because somehow I felt that I didn't deserve it. And because I've had so much disappointment and pain from childhood right up into my, you know, right up until I kind of started doing this empowerment work, it was hard for me to start accepting good stuff. It was hard for me to start accepting love. It was hard for me to accept that it was okay for me to have that stuff. I didn't think that I deserved it. And so, you know, I've had stages where I've had times where I've really wanted to sabotage the good stuff that was happening to me. But it had to be a daily ritual of self-love, a daily ritual of black self-love. I needed to keep empowering myself, keep parenting myself with all the different things that I've learned about myself, about what I need to be nurtured. And in changing the negative script that's in my head, I was able to make different decisions about the choices that I made on a daily basis. But I had to stay committed to loving my blackness. I had to stay committed in who I am, because I know that a lot of the reasons why I kept wanting to sabotage myself is because I had low self-esteem. I felt so bad about myself as a black person, as a black woman, that I didn't think that as a black person I deserved anything good. All I deserved was pain. All I deserved was deprivation. I didn't think that I deserved anything good. And so knowing that at the root of my chaotic behaviour, my chaotic situation, was the black self-hate, the internalized racism, I had to do things on a daily basis to make sure that I was counteracting those feelings and being aware, just being able to observe in myself, observe my own negative thinking when that stuff is playing itself out. And this is one of the reasons, this is why I created the Black Self-Love Challenge, because I wanted you all to have an opportunity to start thinking more consciously about how self-hate plays itself out. How does it play itself out in your life? How do you sabotage yourself when you don't love yourself? I wanted you to have an opportunity to start experiencing, to start observing yourself, so you can start to make the changes that you need to, so you can start feeling more empowered. The alternative is to stay in the pain and recycle the trauma, recycle the dysfunctional behaviour. And you have to decide if that's what you want. Do you want to pass that on to your children? Do you want to pass that on to your family? Is that how you want to leave this planet? You want to leave this planet with more dysfunction that was passed on down to you? Or do you want to begin to start the cleanup session, start the emotional cleanup session? One of the things they say in recovery is that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and over again and expecting a completely different result. That's when you know that your life has become unmanageable. That's when you know that you're in a cycle of compulsive behaviour, of addictive behaviour, because you just can't stop the behaviour. even when it's hurting you. But you have an opportunity to disrupt that process. You have an opportunity to be in charge of your future. But you have to be willing to actually start making those changes. And it doesn't have to be complicated. I think sometimes we can get so fixated by, projecting what we think is going to happen to us. Maybe the fear of what's going to happen to you is what's keeping you stuck in the same pattern of behaviours. But if you want change, if you really want to make a difference in your life, in your community, in the world, in fighting white supremacy, you have to start with the small things. You have to start with the really small things. It just requires you to just strip back the expectations and just start with the really, really small things. This is one of the reasons why I created the Black Love Challenge. It's a 7-day mini course and it's free. Gives you an opportunity to explore exactly what is black self-love, because that's where you have to start. That's where you have to start. So again, it's www.blackselflove7.juneallen.net. Sometimes I think it might be that, you think that you have to, be really grand in your gestures about changing your life. And it's the small things that actually make the difference. The small things and being consistent. The small ways that you take care of yourself and being consistent. That is how things are really going to change. The big things are just going to scare you. They just end up scaring you, and then you end up doing nothing. So it's important to take baby steps. Every small act of courage is a revolutionary act of black self-love. Every baby step of courage is a revolutionary act of self-love. Doesn't matter how small. Every single baby step matters. It has to start with black self-love. And I'm not talking about the external stuff. I'm not talking about so much the hairstyle and the clothes and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about the internal stuff. I'm talking about the internalized racism. I'm talking about the self-hate. I'm talking about, like I was saying before, the inability for us to receive abundance, to receive love, to be able to have loving relationships with each other and ourselves. We have to start at a basic level to start making the changes. You have to start at a really basic level if you want to start making the changes. Keep it really, really simple. Don't overcomplicate it. One of the simple things that you can do to get started is just to create, and I kind of advise people that I work with to do this, is to create a black self-love list. Create a black self-love list. Just do a huge brain dump on all of the things that nurture you. It might be simple things like, I'll tell you some of the stuff that's on my love list. Clean bed sheets. I absolutely love being in clean bed sheets. Herbal tea in my favourite cup. Honest journaling. Being really mindful of the subjects that I take into my therapy sessions. Staying committed to the recovery work that I do with my sponsor. Doing affirmations that are specifically around blackness, around honouring my melanin, honouring my culture, and giving myself permission to begin again. Doesn't matter what happened yesterday. I have good days and bad days, but I just give myself permission to begin again, just for today. Those are just some of the things that are on my black self-love list. And when I'm having a bad day or things get difficult, sometimes I can't even think about what I need to do to take care of myself. But looking at that list, it just reminds me of what I need to do to take care of myself. Because sometimes, especially when if I'm in pain or things are really difficult, I can retreat into that little girl that doesn't really know how to take care of herself. And so the black self-love list is my parent, is my inner parent, It's quite often if I'm in pain or things are difficult, my adult self can kind of disappear, and then I'm kind of stuck with this child who doesn't really know how to take care of herself. So having the Black Self-Love list is a way of, you know, reconnecting with my inner adult to know how to take care of my inner child. I hope that makes sense. But it really works. I've actually created a sheet for you this week for you to be able to download and start creating your own Black Self-Love list. If you check today's show notes, you can find the link to download it there. I've given you a few examples to get started. Obviously feel free to change, amend, update, and just add to it. It's not something that you can sit down and do in one day. Just keep updating it and changing it as things change and as you just discover things. Because something that I think is really interesting is that quite often when I speak to clients, they don't always know, they don't understand what they like. They don't know what they like. They don't know what they need to do to nurture themselves. And so having a sheet that you can actually document it, write it down, it changes the game. It changes the game around how you take care of yourself, because then you've got a living, working document that you can use. If you want me to help you build your Black Self-Love list, you can schedule a call with me at callme.juneallen.net. On some of these days when social media can get painful around racism and stuff like that, sometimes you just need to come off social media. You can just go to that list and pick something on there that's going to help you. Pick something on there that's going to nurture you. Pick something on there that's going to help you learn to parent yourself. If you can accept the good stuff that you're willing to do for yourself, then it's going to be much easier for you to accept the external good stuff that happens in the other areas of your life. As you give yourself permission to let go of the misery and embrace the good stuff that comes into your life, you're going to have more energy to connect with others at from a more authentic place. You're going to find it more satisfying to connect with your community, and you'll want to do bigger, riskier things in terms of change and stuff like that, because you'll have more strength. You'd have built up a bank of courage, and that means you can go on and do bigger things as you build that bank of courage. But you've got to start with the small things. We stop feeling powerless under the system of white supremacy, and we can really start to take charge of our lives and start feeling more empowered. You can start feeling more empowered to take back your life. This is what internal Black self-love looks like. This is how you make the transition from misery to abundance. This is how you emancipate yourself emotionally. It starts with your relationship with yourself. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm going to leave you with a meditation. My Creator, help me let go of my need to be around chaos and pain. Give me the courage to surrender to my truth. Give me the strength to surrender with compassion through the sadness and the difficult feelings that may arise as I transition through the pain of my past and give myself permission to live fully in the present. I deserve peace. I am worthy of joy. I am willing to accept life challenges as lessons in love. I am willing to let love in. I am willing to let the good stuff happen. And so it is. Ashe. Greetings family, it's June. Let's get honest for a minute. Are you secretly struggling with low self-esteem? Is your negative thinking keeping you small? Would you like more confidence to share your black girl magic? I have 7 days of revolutionary black self-love. It's a free audio email course to show you some simple ways to love on your blackness. Go to www.blackselflove7.juneallen.net. Build your blackalicious life. Be empowered.